Hi everybody, so I finally found my bias tape maker. So in this video I'm going to show you how to make your own bias tape. Now you can use whatever fabric you want for this. You can use the same fabric that you used for your corset. You can use a contrasting fabric, whatever you like. This was just some old fabric that I had from my old Halloween costume, so I figured this would be pretty good to use. And the first thing to do is iron out a good area of it, so that you know that your bias tape isn't going to be wrinkled in any way. Okay, I'm going to just finish ironing this and then I'll be right back. Alright, so here's my piece of scrap fabric that I've ironed, and here's the selvage on one side, and this is what you want to pay attention to. Now, you want to start making strips on a 45-degree angle. Now, if some of you have your calculus set still and you have that little right triangle with a 45-degree angle on it, that works really well. If you don't, I have a mat here that has angles on 30 degrees, 60 degrees, and 45 degrees. So if I wanted to follow this, all I would really have to do is set the selvage up along this straight line here and then fold over my fabric so that it meets the 45-degree angle, like so. If you don't have one of these mats either, all you really need to do is take an ordinary piece of paper and fold it in once diagonally, like this. So that the top of the paper is matching the side of the paper here. And if you really want to, you can just, get rid of this part at the bottom here. And what you've just made is a triangle with a 45-degree angle. So all you really need to do is, on your fabric, set this down, like so, matching one edge up with the selvage, and then you can trace along the 45 degree. Okay, so now we have our first line drawn on the 45-degree angle. This is called the bias of it. And the reason why you want it perfectly on the 45-degree angle is because this is what has the most stretch of it. Now for a corset you don't want any stretch, but for your bias tape you do want stretch because that's what kind of hugs the curves along the top and the bottom of your corset and looks really smooth. Now the next thing you want to do is figure out the width of your bias tape. Now my bias tape maker is 25 millimeters wide, so it will give me bias tape that's 1 inch wide, but this is a double folded bias tape. So what that means is I'm going to need double the width that is written here. So I'm going to need 50 millimeters or about 2 inches wide tape before I go to fold it. So I'm just going to take this French curve again. I like it because I can actually see through it, and I'm going to measure 5 centimeters thick. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm just going to notch it. And continue along this way, just making marks along parallel to the line you had just made at a width of 5 centimeters. And then join the marks. Okay, so after you've made your parallel lines and however many lengths of bias tape you need, all you need to do now is cut it out. So use scissors, use rotary cutters, use whatever you want. Okay, So your bias tape is now cut out. So here is the two pieces of bias tape that I had just made, or what will become the bias tape. And if you can actually see both ends of it, let me just try to shorten it in some way, like this, and like this. You'll see that the bias tape isn't a parallelogram, it's more of a trapezoid. So these sides here, they go in opposite directions than rather than the same direction. So this causes a bit of a problem if you need to lengthen your bias tape in some way, because if you have too short bias tape to cover one side of your corset, you're going to have to stitch them together. So you really want your binding to look like this by the time it's done, right? So what you're going to need to do is sew it together like so, and sew it like this. But that means that when you're putting these two parts together, they're not going to match up like this. Because if you match up the points together, you're going to get binding that is at a right angle to one another. You don't want that. You want your points to be facing away from each other and so straight across, so that when you flip it over, then they're going to be parallel to each other. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so here we are back at the ironing board, and here is a close-up of my bias tape maker, because you probably couldn't see it very well before. And you can see the reflection of the camera. But anyway, you can see the 25mm width here. So that is the width of the bias tape once it's all folded up and everything. And you can get different widths if you want, but I prefer the 25mm or 1 inch wide. And you can see it has a wide end and it has a narrow end. And what you do is you can hold it by this handle here, because you're going to have to drag it along later on. But what you want to do to start is take your tape, your flat tape, and feed it through this little wide end here. And if you're having trouble getting it through, then what you're going to do is you're just going to take a pin or something very narrow, stick it into this slot, and just try to drag it through. Now there's no real elegant way to do this, but and you just want to try and straighten it up like so. And you can see when it comes out the other end, it's going to be folded fairly equally on each side like that. So you have the opening here, and on the other side, this is how your finished bias tape is going to look. So what you're going to do is you're just going to set it down and start ironing on this side. And then you're going to just take the handle and drag it along like so, and continue ironing. Okay, so here's the completed bias tape. It's all ironed out and everything. And here is the finished side, which is going to actually end up on the edge of the corset. So why would you want to make your own bias tape as opposed to buying your own? Why go through the effort? Just because bias tape, it can be quite expensive depending on where you get it, and it also can be quite difficult to get matching bias tape depending on the color you're working with. So this cost me maybe $5, and all the bias tape I use is now free, instead of buying you know, $3 or $4 every single time I need bias tape for a project. So it does pay for itself eventually if you're willing to put in the time and the effort.